Podcasting is more than just talking. It's listening. BSing with Bob Schmidt.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast, talking entrepreneurship, business, and marketing. My guest today is somebody you may have heard, may have seen, may have checked out his Netflix special. He's an entrepreneur. He's a comedian. He's an all-around good guy. Shane Mauss is my guest. Grew up in the area where I'm living right now. I grew up in the Onalaska, Wisconsin, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And made it big.
Well, big's a relative term, but yeah, certainly by Onalaska, Wisconsin standards, I'm quite the celebrity. but I'm actually in town for my 20-year high school reunion.
And you went to it already,
yeah,
right? How did that go?
Already. It was good. It was interesting. I wasn't particularly interested when I heard about it.
Right.
I was kind of on the fence a little bit, and I skipped the 10-year, and so I was like, well, it's not something that happens very often. I'll go and check it out. I was very happy that I did, just because it was a really interesting. I'm big into like meditation and kind of observing your thoughts as they arise, and certainly a high school reunion, there's just this it was almost overwhelming, just flood of memories coming back from every time you see someone and you're like, who I kind of recognize this person, who's this? And you see the name tag, like, oh, okay, and then how do I, and then, your brain works through this associative memory, so it accesses this memory of when you were in third grade, math class or whatever with this person, and someone peed their pants in there or whatever, and so you just have all these bizarre, interesting memories come back, and it was a pretty wild experience.
I went to my 30th last year.
Yeah, how was it?
It was the same thing. And the people that you weren't really friends with, all of a sudden they're your friends, and the girls that kind of treated you like shit, all of a sudden they liked you.
I thought everyone was pretty cool. You
Right.
could tell there was some people that still had a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, which, it was 20 years ago.
Right.
Like, I was beat up and picked on, and so I also did my fair share of beating up and picking on people, unfortunately,
Right.
as well. And so, I've moved past whatever, like, unfairness I felt that it's more as you age, the guilt of the transgressions that you committed are way heavier on you than the things that someone else did to you. Hopefully, anyway. I think that's the way it should be if you're a decent human being that's trying to learn and better themselves.
Right. Did anybody come up and suck up to you because you're a national guy now, that people like, oh, Shane Mauss, that guy, I've seen him on this, and this, and he's got his own Netflix special, and
Yeah, some people got a kick out of the idea that, I'm on TV and doing, they say, hey, I'm used to dealing with, once in a while having like a starstruck person or what. And then there's also, like, sometimes there's people that are a little envious or jealous or whatever, but then there's a lot of people that just don't really care that much either, and I think that's a little closer to the reality of how someone should assess my status as not caring about it, because I certainly don't.
No, when you were in high school, did you have did you want to be a comedian? Did you want to be
Yes, I wanted to be a comedian since I was like 9 or 10 years old.
Were you a smart ass in school?
I was a very quiet kid, and when I did talk, I was a smart ass.
Okay.
And I was in detention a lot, and I was in trouble a lot. But I was pretty quiet. When I opened my mouth, it got me in trouble a lot. I wasn't the kind of class clown that, like, made everyone, including the teacher, laugh. I was the kind of guy that said something that like a few people would laugh at and everyone else would be like made uncomfortable.
So was it smart humor then back then, or was it thought provoking like you're doing now?
I'd say that I was always pretty cerebral. I think that going through a phase of smoking tons and tons of weed and like wild alcoholism, trying to figure out this confidence stuff in life, dumbed me down a little bit for a period. But yeah, I mean, I think I was always a pretty thoughtful person. I'm not quick. Like I'm not a good improviser.
I saw you do improv with Live from lacrosse.
Oh yeah, that's true. I'm an okay improviser, but I'm especially good at kind of critical thinking, sitting and thinking deliberately for a while about what it is I want to say and how to say it. And I'm a contemplative person, and I spend a lot of time in my head and a lot of time daydreaming and that sort of stuff. And I'm definitely not the kind of guy that's just like on all the time and like, hey, zip zap, and like cracking jokes like constantly. And I've never been that way. I'm a pretty laid back dude. So yeah, I think a lot of people, when they think of like, oh, you're a stand-up comedian, you must just be like a laugh a minute. And people like always ask my girlfriend, like, is it just a non-stop comedy show being around Shane all the time? And she's like, no, he's just a normal person.
Well, they say that a lot of stand-up comedians have like a lot of depression issues and things like that.
Yeah,
do you deal with?
Depression's my main.
That's your main thing. That's what you offer.
Yeah, a lot of people have. I mean, I'm not complaining or meaning to like feel sorry for myself or get sympathy from anyone, because everyone has their stuff, and I'm very fortunate where I don't have to deal with much anxiety. A lot of chronic anxiety issues is a huge thing, and people are under constant chronic stress. I don't have like OCD or PTSD. I don't have like childhood trauma that I'm still like dealing with. I had a pretty like Leave It to Beaver-ish kind of wholesome upbringing, and so depression's been a thing that's been a constant in my life. But I also, I think it sometimes adds to my creativity and helps me. I'm glad that I'm not the kind of like always positive, like self-help guru. You can do anything and be anything you want to be, and all of life should just be skipping around through this candy land of existence. I think that's very disingenuous, in my opinion.
Right.
And maybe I go the other way with it a little too much to the extreme, and think life is a little more pointless than it actually is, and darker than I probably need to be. But I often find myself valuing some of my depressive states once they're over. They aren't the month when I can't get out of bed. That happens 2 months. That's like 2 months out of the year for me. So that's a large portion of my life when I like can't get myself out of bed. But usually after like a month in bed of like giving up on everything, I end up coming up with some pretty novel and creative ideas, and usually end up finding some new thing to be inspired by.
So is that where a lot of your writing comes from? That is from the inspiration of depression. I mean, that's a weird way to put it. But
depression's such a tricky thing. I have a science podcast called Here We Are, and I talk with scientists very much about psychology and a lot of the evolutionary underpinnings of our motivations and drives, and anxiety and fear and that sort of thing is a really pretty easy thing to figure out. Why the body responds to a given stressor is to kind of, it's meant to protect you. Even though people might go too far with anxiety, it is meant to, if you put your hand on a oven burner, that hurts, and that pain isn't pleasant. But if it weren't for that pain, your hand would burn off without you noticing it. And so these things have a lot of utility, and even things like OCD that are these kind of more pathological things. It's a lot of people trying to kind of take control over their lives and organize the kind of chaos that we exist in. But depression's a kind of a riddle for people. They don't know what the benefit of kind of such a inhibiting, because you're kind of not, like anxiety. A lot of people are exceptionally productive when they're anxious. Anxiety often comes along with a lot of success in life. Being famous has never necessarily been a big goal of mine. I mean, you just mean like to be well known enough-ish to make a living as a stand-up, and then have that be a secure enough living, because you catch some breaks and you get on TV. Right. When I first caught breaks in 2007 or something, I think in 1 year I had like 8 television appearances, and
do you see money incrementally get higher then after that? More people see who you are, know who you are.
But then it plateaus and then it starts dipping.
Oh,
and then so then you like gotta keep the buzz going, and then the entertainment shifts wildly all of the time. It used to be everything was just radio, and now podcasting's kind of taking over, and a lot of talk radio is fading away, and late night television is kind of seems like it's fading away a bit, and
right.
and we have these like docu-series stuff is getting a little more popular. Reality TV is probably had a bit of a bubble, but it's still going fairly strong. And these are all things that didn't really exist all that long ago. I don't know when the first season of Survivor was, but it was.
I think they're in like number 42 now or something. It's like 20 years ago or 17 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, so
right.
20 years ago. So I think like when I was in high school, no one knew of reality TV, and that was certainly a long time before podcasting. I think the first podcasters were maybe 15 years ago, and podcasting didn't get popular until about 10 years ago. Was the very beginning of like, maybe Mark Maron's WTF started having a little popularity.
Right.
Joe Rogan started.
Have you been on Mark's show? So you've been on Mark's and on Joe's?
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now you're hanging out on my front porch.
Yeah, here we are.
So what's the difference between doing like a Mark Maron show or doing a Joe Rogan or compared to doing like BS and Bob Schmidt? Is there a difference, or do they have people there like helping you out rather than you coming up to my front door and coming on in?
I mean, Mark Maron's podcast is in his garage, and Joe has a pretty nice studio, and someone's there to get you coffee if you want coffee. And I think one of the great things about podcasting is it's rather simple. It's pretty low overhead, and certainly breaking through like anything else that becomes popular. Now, if you want to start a podcast and you want to break through to grab attention from you're now in a sea of a million other podcasts.
Right.
And, but that's just kind of the state of the world now. I don't know what the next big thing. I hate social media, but that's been a huge. Social media wasn't really. I think when I started was like right as Dane Cook was kind of getting his MySpace fame, and he was kind of the first comedian to benefit from social media, and it paid off very well for him. And next thing you know, he's doing arenas and stuff. Well, then everyone rushes into the social media,
Right.
and so it's and now people are leaving Facebook left and right. And I don't have an Instagram account, but a lot of people are going to Instagram, and then there's like, I don't know, Twitter or something like that out there that you hear about. It's like some sort of live video gaming thing, but also people do podcasts and other things on it, I guess. And so there's just all these, this is with the internet and the kind of technological advances, the internet's definitely changed the landscape of the human condition, but especially entertainment, I would say, even more so than many other aspects of life. So these things happen very quickly, and you always have people that want to be like ahead of the curve and in the coolest, newest thing, and then you always have people on the back end of it that reluctantly jump on board something after everyone else already has.
Already has it and done.
My mom just got on Facebook this year. So.
Are you friends with her?
I don't think so.
So
on Facebook or in real life?
Either one. Either one. I'm just asking.
My mom's a wonderful person, but the thought of her being on Facebook is not my favorite.
Right. Well, my dad just got on it, and my dad comments on every one of the pictures. Great picture. And if he's listening right now, he's really like, I don't do that, and my kids will agree. When it comes to entrepreneurship and being a comedian, how much of your marketing and stuff like that do you do on your own, or do you have somebody that works for you that does Shane Mauss merchandise and stuff? Or are you doing?
It depends.
Are you booking your own stuff, or do you have somebody doing that for you? Or?
I have, I have a manager at the moment, and that's a little more career direction and a little more like putting together bigger meetings for TV pitches and that sort of thing.
Right.
And like my management just locked up a half-hour special for me, and I can't say who it's with, but happening soon. Just yesterday. So that's the kind of thing that a manager does in terms of personal appearance booking. That's a little more in the realm of an agent. I've had an agent through most of my career. I don't have one at the moment because I've been doing a little more indie tour stuff, and I can do a better job of that.
Would you rather do a smaller arena, like
arena?
Well, would you rather do a smaller theater like the Cavalier, or like I know you're gonna be you're gonna be in a bar later tonight, I think, aren't you?
Yeah,
doing 2 shows.
Yeah, I do 2 shows in Winona at Big Boobs. And I
was going to say boobs. It's B-U-B-S, but they pronounce it boobs. I think just so they can say boobs is what I think it is. I'm pretty sure.
Whatever. I mean, it's silly, but yeah, that's actually a pretty cool setup, and I go through there every time I'm in town and have new material to do for people. I try to do a show at the Cavalier and at Boobs, but I mean, it's definitely doing shows like that are, for me, usually a little more fun, and the potential for profitability. There's greater risk involved and a lot more marketing that I have to do on my own than, like, say, performing in a comedy club, where the comedy club is doing much of the advertising and maybe lining up local radio spots or whatever.
Isn't it mostly when you do it at a comedy show or at a comedy club? Isn't it just a paycheck? But when you're doing it here, you're getting a cut of the piece.
Yeah, that's. I mean, put simply, yes. I mean, it's a little more nuanced than that, but yeah. And so, when I do indie stuff, it's on me to kind of figure out cool. I work with someone to figure out kind of cool artwork and poster design stuff. I advertise my shows on my own podcast, which helps. I go and be a guest on other people's podcasts to promote my shows. I have had a PR rep in the past, and when I have like kind of another like big tour or something like that. I did a 111 city tour 2006 into 2007, and I had like a PR person and a personal assistant and all that stuff at that time, and tons of Facebook ads, and spending tens of thousands of dollars on social media advertising and that sort of thing at the time,
Did it pay off? Did the advertising pay off?
Yeah. I mean, it's mixed, and it kind of depends on the kind of show that you're doing, and you can't necessarily. It was a themed show, and so it made it easier to target a specific. That show in particular was about psychedelics, and it made it easy to kind of target people's.
Well, we did a couple radio shows on that, I think.
Yeah. So that was easy to kind of target people's interest based on if people are a fan of DMT, the Spirit Molecule documentary Facebook fan page, or whatever it might be, or Pink Floyd or whatever. So you find all these kind of targets, and so anyone interested in those pages will hopefully see that ad, so you can find your demographic a little easier. But trying to say advertise just a regular stand-up act, which is what I'm doing now, can be a little more challenging. To be like, hey, are you interested in stand-up comedy? Well, how about this stand-up comedian you've never heard of before? I mean, it's kind of like, if someone wants to go and see stand-up comedy, they can always just like look up their local club and be like, oh, who's coming up? And so it's something that I'm constantly trying to figure out. I've done my podcast live in places, and trying to figure out the marketing for that was different as well. And I have other, I want to do more things where I'm combining science and comedy, and so I'm currently in the process of putting together what the marketing looks like for that, how to create the right title that kind of gets across the point that this is like part comedy, part science, and then writing the correct description, and maybe pulling some clips out of my act that have been recorded to put together a couple promo videos so people get a little taste of maybe what they're going to see, and figure. That's all stuff that I, for the most part, figure out on my own.
So does like YouTube and that help out? Because I know that obviously I've known you for a couple of years. We've interviewed probably 5 or 6 different times over the course of the last few years, I'm guessing. But I still Googled your name yesterday, and I still went on and I looked at it. I watched a couple of videos that you did. So I mean,
you'll see there wasn't a ton of stuff on.
There really wasn't. A lot of it was older stuff that I'd seen in the past.
Yeah, it's a lot of it. So if you put material, if a stand-up puts material on YouTube, the trouble with that is, one, it's usually not as high a quality as some of, unless it's like, if I'm on Conan or something like that, they'll put that on YouTube.
Right.
But this year I had a Comedy Central This Is Not Happening show, and so they put that on Comedy Central's site, aired it on Comedy Central, and also put it on YouTube. So I'll do stuff, but for me to say I recorded the shows that I'm doing tonight and decided to put some clips on YouTube. Well, one, that kind of burns some of that material because people will watch YouTube clips ahead of time, so then I can't.
And then you can't really use it as part of your show.
Yeah, then I can't really use it in, say, I want to try to do a hour special on Netflix or Showtime, HBO, Comedy Central, whatever, or one of these other mediums out there, FX, or there's always a zillion little companies popping up. And now that material, oftentimes contractually, you can't do material that you've already released in some other fashion.
Right.
And so to have me set up like my crappy camcorder to record in kind of like a little indie dive bar, my show, like, who knows if it's going to be like half full tonight or something, because it's summertime and it's hard to get people out during the summer.
Right. Okay, real quick, because you mentioned that again, because Steve Walker, Steve's from Live from La Crosse. He wrote, not to be a nerd, but the last name is pronounced Boobnitz, and the nickname became boobs, spelled B-U-B-S. So
Oh.
where's the nits come from there? I don't know, but
I'm asking the wrong person. I have no idea. I guess that's their last name, Boobnuts.
Yeah, I don't know.
And that makes sense. And then the nickname is Boobs.
Right.
All right. That makes a little more sense than having to explain to people. Like, we
Where the
just
hell do
spelled
the boobs come
boobs wrong.
from? What drives you?
What drives me? I mean, that's something I would like to know. The exploration of like what my drives are and what my motivations are something that I'm constantly trying to pursue. I don't necessarily trust whatever conscious narrative that I tell myself. You know, I do a number of interviews and people say, like you asked, how long do you want to be a comedian? And I can tell you when I was like 9 or 10 years old, I had this friend that said you should be a stand-up comedian, and that planted the seed in my head. And you know, I loved like the art and the craft of stand-up comedy, and I became a fan, and this became my passion, and now I do what I love. Well, if a alien anthropologist were to come down and look at what I was doing, they would be like, well, see, this primate has figured out a way to draw attention to himself and uses his wit to increase his social status, gain resources, and to attract potential mates. And I would say that that is probably a more accurate picture of reality than the conscious story that I'm constructing about this thing that I'm passionate or whatever. So that's a lot of me kind of examining what reality is, and the difference between objective reality and what we can measure and test and make predictions about, and the conscious narrative that we tell ourselves is something that I find endlessly fascinating and spend a lot of time currently looking into and talking about and obsessing over. My personality, my lifestyle tends to change pretty rapidly as well. So if you talk to me in 2 years, I might find myself into rugby, and like now my whole act is all about rugby, and that's just my life.
How often do you switch your show?
I mean, I try to write a new hour of material every year at least. And so, you know, in my current act, like I did in lacrosse the other day, I did an hour and 45 minutes. I would say out of that, there is probably 45 minutes of stuff that I've done other times that I've been in lacrosse that has been repurposed to construct a new narrative. And so it's the same material but used a little differently. And then an hour of material that was just completely fresh and new and wasn't doing the last time I was here. And the last time I was here, I was doing my psychedelic tour, which was hour and a half, 2 hours of material about psychedelics and their potential for as a meditative therapeutic aid. And so that's 2 hours of novel material that I don't do in any other shows.
Right. How often does so you've got the hour long show and you're out there doing it? How much does it change from day to day?
Day to day, not a whole lot.
I mean,
usually like
just
a couple lines.
Like the audience participation, or you get a laugh here or a laugh there, and maybe not a laugh at this show.
Yeah, I figure out a tag to like I figure out just like a little aside at the end of a joke that I improvise, and then that becomes part of the act. I switch the order of some jokes around and open with a joke that I used to close with or something, and then that leads to a new novel transition, figuring out how to go from this joke to this different joke in a different order, and I think of some funny way of connecting them and like the actual change outside of just the order in terms of material is like maybe a minute of new material or something like that, and see how that goes. And some of it is it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing seeing what sticks. So in a given show, I'm mostly doing stuff that has been crafted over time and is kind of tried and true, and then I have like 5 to 10 minutes in there that I'm playing around with and tinkering with a little bit, and is a little more on the fence.
Do you have a go-to joke if somebody says, "All right, comedian, tell me a joke, make me laugh"? Do you have something that you just like?
Only when I'm pulled over by the police.
What does that mean?
Like if I get pulled over for speeding,
right,
which is often, I've found that if I can figure out a way to let the cops know that I'm a comedian, like I'm coming from a show or something like that, there's something about it, like they're worried I'm gonna like make a joke about cops if they're a dick to me or something like that, and that's going to hurt public's perception. So then they like really try to like be as nice and cool as possible, and so they'll be like, "Can you tell me a joke?" And right. and they don't want to find themselves in my act, right. And so then like when a cop tells you to tell a joke, like if any other person asks me to tell them a joke, I'm like, no, I'm off the clock. It doesn't work like that.
It's like a cook and make me a sandwich, or you know.
And it's something. I mean, it's just a very different context. What's funny and what's going to make us laugh in a genuine conversation right now, and what is funny on stage are two very different things. And for me to tell a joke right now, which I can do just to demonstrate how poorly it works, is kind of disingenuous and just doesn't work as well. But you know, when a cop like orders you to tell them a joke, you feel obliged. So I have it's just kind of this dumb, old, reliable joke. If it's a male cop, I'll do it was on my first album. There's a joke about my I told my girlfriend I wanted to go to a strip club, and she said, "What do you want to go to a strip club for? I'll strip for you." And I was like, "Well, I guess I'll just tell my friends to come over here." That's just stupid.
Cops probably laugh at that joke.
And they do.
They don't expect it, right?
Yeah. So
what does the female cop?
It's a female cop. I forget what jokes that I use with the female cop. It doesn't happen that often.
You don't pull up the Mr. D's. You don't pull up the Mr. D's joke.
No. I don't tell them a 10-minute long story about running from cops and ultimately wiping my ass with a donut. No, I'm sure some of them would appreciate it, but
they probably would find that pretty funny. You mentioned earlier that the alien came down. Here's a primate drawing attention to themselves. How do people find you? What's the way to find Shane Mauss?
Well, you can go to ShaneMauss.com. MAUSS. That's how my last name is spelled. So you can go to ShaneMauss.com to find out more of when I'll be in an area near you, and please check out my podcast, Here We Are. You can go to HereWeArePodcast.com, but everything's off of my main ShaneMauss.com website as well. I have a documentary that should be out early next year called Psychonautics, a comics exploration of psychedelics.
Appreciate you spending time with me.
Yeah,
it's kind of cool to do this live to Facebook and the podcast.
Yeah, well, it's awesome.
The BSing with Bob Schmidt podcast is brought to you by Orange Computer. Find them online at orangecomputerlax.com.
This has been another podcastforhire.com production.